Hi, it's Todd of Todd Stuff here, and today we're going to be talking about a windlass crossbow. So this particular one is 1,250 pounds in draw weight. It's one I made a few years ago, and a customer sent it back for basically a bit of maintenance and overhaul. So I'll explain what I've done to it and how it begins life. So 1,250 pounds. Well, a lot of you out there will be saying, really? I don't believe a word of that. The bow steel itself is fairly normal kind of size. It's about 70 centimetres wide, so about 28 inches, something like that. It's about 2 inches high. Now, when the bows are made, we put them on a hydraulic press and we attach a load scale to it, a crane load scale, so I know the weight of this bow at the draw length. The power stroke. The power stroke from the string to the nut is about 6.5 inches. And at 6.5 inches, this bow draws 1,250 pounds. As you would expect, it's heavy, so I'll probably put it down a little bit. I can't actually tell you how heavy it is, I haven't weighed it, but I would think about 11 or 12 pounds overall. It's really quite a thing. I think, from memory, the bow steel itself is about 8 or 9 pounds in weight. And then, of course, you've got the windlass on top. These bows came in this sort of format, around about 1400. I'm sure the windlass was available before that, but the steel bow came in around about 1400. The windlass very quickly became a popular addition to it. Again, people very often ask about the steel bow, why the draw length is so short. The simple answer is we don't know. My expectation is that the metallurgy of the time was just not up to drawing it further. Basically, you can't rely on the bow to not break. And when you've got a bow that weighs, let's say half a bow that weighs 6 pounds, 3 kilos, coming in and smacking you on the side of the head, which is what happens if they break, it's not something you want to find out about. So what you do is you err on the side of caution and you make the power stroke shorter. So this bow could probably run to, I don't know, 7.5, maybe even 8 inches, but it's not what they did. They kept it short at about 6.5 really for the bigger bows like this. We have bow irons on the front, which again, they weren't around in the earlier days of timber and composite bows, simply because they clamped the bow in a way that would weaken it. With a steel bow, that's not an issue. So you've got a series of wedges and the anvils here. This is all shown in another couple of videos that I have about how this is all constructed. Now, what I did as part of the repair on this is, it's a fairly standard fault you get with bows. It's covered by the bow iron here, but what can happen is this bow starts to slip down slightly and you end up with a crack across the bottom of the stock here. Now actually, the central pin at the top here goes through to this hanging hook, which acts as a bracket. The whole lot is riveted together. These elements here of the bow irons also would stop the bow rotating down. So actually, there was never going to be a danger of the front of the stock breaking, but when you've got half a ton in your hands, to see a crack in something is unnerving. So the owner quite rightfully wanted me to repair that. As I say, it's about 4 or 5 years old now, I think. So what I did was I just put a steel staple right into the front here, just cut it into the stock. That's riveted in place there, and then again is riveted in place on the top. So this feature here is not a standard feature that you would see on these sort of bows. But again, if you go to a museum, you will see bows which have been repaired continuously. There's a fantastic one in the Wallace collection covered in bone, but the top of the stock is broken off, the bottom of the stock is broken off. The bow itself used to be a composite, it's now a steel, so that's new. There's been a repair at the stock behind the nut, all these things. So, you know, they don't mind repairing the things, and it's just part of the process of owning a powerful bit of kit like this, really. Another thing to note, and we'll talk about this when I shoot it, is the trigger on this is heavy. It's a very simple trigger system. It goes back to Roman times, in fact. It's the rotating nut, single axle trigger system. Again, I've done another video on this and explained it more in detail. But what that means for a bow of this weight is it is a heavy trigger. So you can't say it's a very pleasant bow to shoot. It's also got quite a kick. But what we'll do is just span it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the first thing to note is that the trigger is set by dragging the string up the stock and over the nut. What that means is you have to set the nut, actually I'll just remove the windlass, you have to set the nut in that position. If the nut is even like that, the string will engage on it and it will rotate the nut around and bounce over the top. It's not really what you want. So you just rotate the nut to that point, and then the string as it comes up will rotate it round and into the right position. The trigger will then pop into place, and you can take the windlass down. So I'll just show you that process. So I'm just going to set the nut now, and then you place the bow down. Right, so I'm just going to span it back now. So foot in the stirrup to keep it steady, and wind it back. Now, again, I'm not lying, 1,250 pounds, but you know, I can do it with one hand. What you need to remember is that the mechanical advantage on this is about 140, 150 to 1, something like that. So actually, it makes it a relatively easy thing to load. It's only when you get right towards the end that it starts to become a little bit harder work, but right, so the trigger is now engaged. Now the other thing about a windlass bow to remember is after you've shot it, you can unclip the windlass now, but at this point all the cords are here, and it's actually a real faff to unwind the thing. These things, the cranks spin around, they catch your arm, it's really a pain. So now that it's pinned down on the end of the bow, you can very simply unwind the cordless there, the windlass, pull it tight, and so now it's ready to go for the next shot, and that is by far the quickest way to shoot it. Let's drop that down. Obviously I'd hand it to my loader, but we don't have one, or purvey's holder, and we're ready to go. And they are not by any means silent, because I can tell you now my ear is ringing. Right, so what we're going to do now is going to test it for speed. So I'll do 3 shots, loading, resetting the windlass. 2 of the bolts are standard. One of them is an adjustable weight bolt, because I lost one of my proper ones earlier on, but it's the same configuration and the same weight as the other 2 now. So here we go. So I'm not going to race it, I'll do it at a reasonable speed. There we go. Just going to unset the windlass. Make sure the nut's good. Alright, so second shot. So, I mean, it is a bit of a faff, but it's not actually too tiring. It's not as bad to use as a Cranaquin bow, actually, which I find a very tiring thing. But as you can see, one of the big problems with windlass, you've got so many cords running around, they just get tangled. So another standard bolt. So that's just above the black. First one was a little bit high, so I did actually adjust my aim. Now this third bolt is a blunt. I really do not want it striking the back of the other 2 bolts. So I am going to deliberately shoot this off to the right a little bit. And even though it's a blunt, it's still stuck into a brand new straw Boss. Yeah, it's a powerful thing. And actually I also felt that one on my cheekbone. So there you are, £1,250 windlass crossbow. Yeah?
Yep.
Well, this is a very long and tedious walking part, going to find out what was shot. We didn't pick the best place, and we shot a few longbow arrows first, see where those gone, but what really here is crossbow bolts, and I've got one just inside the tree line on the right, I think, and another one just over the tree line. They're not going to be the easiest things to find, so
Right.
there might be some digging about.
So, what have we got here? This is yours.
These are mine, rubbish! I've been outshot by Francis.
Oh, it is there.
Can we just take a rangefinder on that back to the van?
Yeah, you can.
This is
227.
227.
Yards.
Yeah, 227 yards.
All right, that's all right.
Yep.
So this one went through a tree with fairly predictable results. I guess that's why feathers are better, but the bottom line is that wood vanes last longer in a magazine, less good against trees.
235.
235. So Liebel, back in his work in the 1970s for the French Army, he worked on a basis of between 240 and 260 yards for a windlass bow. So I'm 5 yards short. So we're basically there or thereabouts, which I must confess, it's the first time I've ever done a proper distance test with a rangefinder. And I'm actually thrilled about, because like any craftsman, I doubt what I do a little bit. And actually that, for me, that's just complete confirmation that I'm doing what should be done. So that's brilliant. So I'm very thrilled. So 235 yards off a 1250 pound bow and just short of a 90 gram bolt, 88 gram. So very good.